we're going to get an update from Guam EPA spokesperson Nick Lee on the situation in the Marbo Cave area. Good morning, Nick. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, good morning, Sabrina. Good morning, Chris. Good morning, Senator. Thank you for having me. So just a quick update on the notice of violation and the compliance orders that were issued to Samsung ENC America Inc. on the 29th. As a reminder, the compliance orders required them to complete installation of interim measures on the project site. So as of this moment, there is still construction taking place on the project site as emergency mitigation management so that stormwater is properly managed on the property. In discussions with the project manager on site and with the chief engineer for Guam EPA, that's Brian Bearden, we can report that removal of excess silt material from the basin of Ponding Basin 1 has been completed. In addition to that, over 3 feet of excess silt material was collected from the basin of pond number 2. With regard to pond 5A, slope work continues in order to expand the collective volume of that basin. There's also silt fence repair work being completed at pond 2 as the portion of the silt fence experiences the most pressure from the rainwater runoff. Berm sloping work also continues at pond 4 with excess material outside that berm being removed. Swell improvements are also taking place at Ponding Basin 5B with the edges of the swell trimmed to provide a wider channel for the flow of water. In addition to all of the updates from the project manager on site, Guam EPA continues to monitor the progress along with reviewing some of the plans that are going into mitigative measures.
How many total, again, I think I asked you this before, how many total ponding basins were supposed to be constructed?
5. According to their erosion and sediment control plan, there was supposed to be 5 ponding basins constructed prior to any earth moving work.
And how many were actually constructed prior to any moving of earthwork?
I'm thinking 2 at this point, but that's not what the plan called for. Again, all 5 needed to be constructed prior to the start of any of the earth-moving work. Mm-hmm. I do also want to provide an update from our environmental monitoring and analytics services program. So the EMAS program did do a second inspection after the Marbo site inspection. And this inspection was relative to looking for any evidence of sediment plume along the coastline. Fortunately, there was no evidence of sediment plume along the coastline southeast of the cave. That inspection also led them to deeper areas in the jungle. However, in those areas, they did observe scouring and the deposit of material throughout the limestone forest. So if you want to read the entire report, it's available on our website, epa.guam.gov/notice of violations. You can check that out. Both reports from our water pollution control program along with our EMAS program are available for view.
I'm sorry, what is the sediment plume?
Sediment plume is the loose material that would be present in the water column along the line. And that's the fine soil that has been displaced through heavy rainfall.
Just to go back to the whole construction of the ponding basins, and it's supposed to be constructed before any movement of the earth. Did Guam EPA ever go back to inspect and make sure that they were following the plan? because there's 150,000 solar panels already constructed, and Marbo Cave is a mess. There's flooding, blocking access to property by original landowners. So I'm just wondering, did anybody go back during this whole time to make sure they were following their plans?
I don't have the inspection schedule. What I do know and understand about inspection of project sites, during the rainy season, you're most likely to see the agency present to ensure that BMPs installed on project sites are working as they're designed. If we did receive a complaint, that would warrant an immediate inspection of the site. I don't recall the agency receiving any complaints about that site, and I can speak with the program to find out if there were any inspections prior to the revelation that the plans weren't being followed.
Nick, I mean, so obviously the plans weren't followed, but whose bad is that? Is it you guys? I mean, is that you guys' job? Because you go out there and you expect in rainy season, there was a rainy season last year, but it comes every year, same time.
Right. Well, we would like to be everywhere as much as we can. Unfortunately, we don't have, the proper human resources to pull that off. We do rely heavily on the community to provide us with reports as to what's going on there. We do, as the saying goes, see something, say something. Unfortunately, we're not able to cover the entire island. We cover as much as we can, and it is still on the permit holder to ensure that they are following what they're permitted to do by the government.
What about a US EPA? Has there been any communication between Guam EPA and US EPA?
Yes, there have been, particularly with concerns over Clean Water Act violations. As we mentioned in the past interviews, Guam does not have primacy for Clean Water Act violations. So anytime that there's a distress in any of the U.S. navigable waters, that automatically will trigger a response from U.S. EPA. I imagine with the magnitude of this type of violation that folks from the Region 9 compliance branch will be paying a trip to Guam. Once we can confirm that, we will convey that to the public. But U.S. EPA is very aware of this situation.
Has Guam EPA seen any evidence of, pollution?
Pollution
in the water. Yeah.
No, not in the water column based on the coastline assessment at that southeast portion from the cave. There was no observance of any sediment plume in the water column.
What about the Department of Public Works? Have you guys been in contact with them? We also know that the Guam Contractors Licensing Board was on site yesterday and possibly might be going back today to conduct an additional assessment.
We understand that the Department of Public Works officials have been conducting their own inspections. I'm certain that they were conducting review of the same plans that we looked at. It's probably best that officials from DPW chime in on what their actions are.
But you guys don't communicate, DPW and Guam EPA?
We do, but I don't have any details on that, on what that discussion has been like.
Well, we do have Senator Joanne Brown in the Zoom room, and she is, as we mentioned earlier, a former deputy administrator of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency, and also previously a director of the Department of Public Works. Senator Brown, thank you for joining us in this discussion last minute.
Hi, good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, Senator. I'm sorry. Let me just resituate myself away from the EOC.
Nick,
They're
if you need to
starting
go, I think you can go. Is that okay, Bree, or
Yeah, sure.
do you want to hang around?
It's up to him if he wants to hang around.
Maybe you just want to hang around.
Sure.
We're going to get
That's not
empanada in a
problem.
few minutes. Okay. Thank you, Nick. Bree.
I'm in a quieter room now.
Yeah, 'cause
Okay.
if they hear Senator Joanne Brown over there, they're probably going to be like, "What are you doing?"
Well, yeah, Senator Brown, let's just start with just your whole reaction to what is happening up at the Marbo Cave area.
Well, certainly, good morning, Sabrina. When I first heard the news story last week with regards to the Marbo Cave project, I've not personally been up there. I sort of would like to go up and look at the site. Don't necessarily need to go on the site, but be able to look at it, because when I looked at the photos of the project that the media, including yourselves, aired, it looks like quite a substantially sized project. And I understand there's lack of resources. I've yet to run an agency where everything's at my disposal and I have everything I need to operate. But what we needed to do, and I understand Guam Epa is no larger than it was when I was deputy back in the early 90s. But what we do is we maximize our presence. And certainly when you have a substantially sized project like this particular project in Marbo, you do regular inspections. And so I'm a bit concerned as to whether or not Guam EPA not only has been doing regular inspections, but whether or not they've been requiring the contractor to take corrective action. It's one thing to approve these projects and allow them to go out there, but you don't sit around and wait till you get a report. You go out there and make sure, particularly with regards to the concern of erosion control. Because when you're clearing property that has been vegetated, I mean, the trees, the plants, the roots of those trees and plants are what keep the soil and sediment from running off into the water. So that's critical. I mean, it's not just ensuring just the silt screens, but if the requirements were there for ponding basins, those things should have been prioritized at the very, very beginning before they started doing all this massive clearing to install these solar panels. So I think there's failure on both sides. Failure for the contractor to comply with the requirements, and failure of the regulatory agencies for being there and inspecting. I mean, you can't have an excuse with a project of this size to not be doing regular inspections and address corrective action. The other thing, too, that's critically important to recognize is Guam EPA has an awful lot of power. If that agency is properly run, it can very easily execute those requirements when necessary and put it in place. They should have issued a stop work order and addressed immediate compliance. And had they been doing regular inspections, and I don't know, I mean, I think that's something we probably need to look at, is look at their inspection report of how often have they been out there. What communications have they had in writing with regards to the contractor of notifying them that corrective action needed to take place? Because I'll tell you, one of the fastest ways to get compliance is shut the project down. All of a sudden, you have their absolute full attention. They're going to want to know what they need to do to comply, because obviously time is money. They have personnel, they have equipment on site. They need, they're going to be paying money and not moving forward with their project. And this has happened in the past, and certainly some very well-known projects on Guam that I've been involved in during my time. Unfortunately, there's sometimes you'd like to think people are going to comply, but there's always that element of wanting to go around the process and not address these things, and looking at looking at it as secondary with regards to environmental protection. I think for us in the community, I think that should have been first and foremost. So I don't think there's any excuses. If everything was put in place and there was catastrophic failure as what happened here, then I think we could say, well, maybe they didn't properly engineer it. But to hear that there's maybe only 2 of what was intended to be 5 ponding basins that were supposed to be constructed to capture the siltation and runoff, and it was not constructed, I think that raises, certainly in my mind, a big question mark as to why Guam EPA didn't require compliance and request that the contractor proceed to get that in place before they did any further work on this project.
What about the Department of Public Works, since you were the former director, so speaking from your experience, would Public Works also, should they have also been monitoring this project and conducting inspections?
They have the same capability of going on these construction sites and addressing compliance. I mean, keep in mind the government is the regulatory agency. Of course, Guam EPA has jurisdiction with regards to environmental requirements. DPW is the ultimate because, you circulate your permit among different agencies and get their approval, but the ultimate signature that activates that permit is DPW. So certainly DPW should have also been out there. And have they? Perhaps they were, but the evidence kind of says otherwise. And that's very concerning. And I'll have to tell you, at some point, these excuses have to stop about, we don't have enough personnel. Well, I didn't have any more personnel back in the early 90s when we had the construction of Menengan Hills. And Menengan Hills wasn't just a surface project. We had bridges. We had underground infrastructure that had to be put in place. This was a substantially sized project. At the same time, we had several golf courses in construction. We had hotels in Tumon that were in construction. That was at the magnitude and the height of the last building boom that we had, and we didn't have any more resources than we have today. But we simply prioritize. I mean, myself in my official capacity as director or deputy, I go out and do inspections. I don't sit around and wait for my staff to tell me, this is where we're at. I don't stay in my air-conditioned office and let the day go by. Actually, the issue with Ladera Towers, the way I caught Ladera Towers is we were coming back from Menengan Hills because the access route to Menengan at the time was through Jonia. You couldn't get through Ordot where the current road is because it hadn't been built at the time. We were coming around the curve up here in Jonia, and I looked across the bay, and what is that construction? Oh, that's a new condo project. I said, well, I don't recall seeing any paperwork on that. Let's go and look at it. Go down to look at Ladera Towers and end up finding out that building was constructed to the 4th floor without clearance from Guam EPA. Mm-hmm. And for the employees, they're like, well, this happens. It happened with Hotel. And I said, well, I'm sorry, it violates the law. You don't get to have this kind of stuff of this magnitude happening and not take effective enforcement action. So that's one of the things when I was there at Guam EPA, we needed to clear up right away. We need to address compliance, ensure that's what our job is. That's the main job that we have to protect the public interest, to protect our drinking water in our coastal areas. So, yeah, it's a bit disturbing. And, I'm sure Nick is in a difficult situation because he's the official spokesman. He's not the one actually going out and doing inspections, but those that should or the current administrator should be clearly speaking on these issues and explain as to why the evidence doesn't show that there was consistent inspection and compliance required by Guam EPA or DPW for that matter.
Yeah. We've been trying to get DPW. We had Linda Abanez, who's the deputy, on was it last week?
Yeah.
And I was just kind of confused by some of the answers she gave. And so I'd reached out to her again this morning because they had a meeting Friday. And she's now saying, you got to get a hold of the director, Mr. Ariola. So, I mean, yeah, this is really turning into that, what's that old monkeys where you have one covering the eyes, one covering the ears, it's like nobody knows. Guam EPA saying, DPW is pointing it. Then you got the Guam Contractors Licensing Board doing their investigation.
Mm-hmm. I also...
But, as I mentioned, a project of this size, and, looking at, again, I've not physically gone out and looked at it. I think I'm going to take a drive and just look at the overlook looking down at Marbo and look at this project. There's no excuse. There's no excuse for this. The contractor's at fault, and we can point the finger at the contractor, but in my experience, having worked at these two departments over the years, the failure is also there in the government because this should have been caught sooner. It should have been addressed sooner. And they have the authority and the mechanisms to do it. So, I don't have enough personnel. Well, hey, you can get out there. You've got how many days in the week to go out there and inspect? Because right now I have to ask you, what other major project are they inspecting right now? Route 3, the base up there. How many things are on your plate that you can't go and do regular inspections? Because the job of doing compliance is really not that complicated, to be honest with you. You have a listing of what they're supposed to address. You go down that checklist and verify. And for me, going out and doing field work, I actually do, would prefer that more than sitting in an office all day. So it's inexcusable as to how things got to that level of damage of what happened. And I think, many of our people have seen the photos of Marbo Cave. And we're very disappointed and disgusted to see the outcome of this. This could have been avoided. And while you may have failures along the way with an erosion control, silk screen breaks down, it's too much water coming down, but you generally would overall expect compliance with those plans. And it doesn't sound or look so far that has been the case. And I think the government itself needs to take some responsibility with regards to its job and making sure that it stays on top of it.
Well, the other part of this whole mess is, Guam EPA in their notice of violation was looking at this fine of $18 million for, $10,000 a day per violation for a period of 368 days. But the maximum fine was $125,000, I guess, by GAR, by law. Senator Sabina Perez, Speaker Therese Lahi, just recently they introduced that bill to kind of change that cap. What's your thoughts on this, Senator Brown?
Well, I mean, you can go ahead and change those amounts. I mean, that's not that complicated a process to do through legislation, but I don't think that addresses the concern that I see with regards to this particular project. I mean, you can increase the amounts, but if the government of Guam, through its respective agencies, are not doing proper inspection of these sites and ensuring compliance by contractors, because, you got some really good contractors out there. Their reputation matters to them. They're going to make every effort to make sure they're addressing compliance, especially now at a time when, our community is getting more sensitive to environmental protection. In this particular case, looking at it, again, I'm on the outside looking in, but been inside for a number of years. It doesn't address the issue as to why the ponding basins were not constructed. Why were they not put in place before work was allowed to continue? Again, looking at the photographs, it looks like a substantial amount of solar panels were installed, and yet the basic requirements of ensuring the sediment control was not addressed. And I think that's a major failure on the part of the respective agencies. And that this excuse, I don't have enough personnel, hey, you've got officials now that are directors of agencies that have their own official vehicle to drive to and from work. Why aren't they getting out? Because I've never had an official vehicle unless I'm out on official duty during work hours. I drive my own car to work every day so that my department or agency can have the resources that they need to do their job. This is inexcusable, especially the fact that these ponding basins were never constructed. It just shows me somebody's asleep at the wheel, and our people are paying now. Understandable, US EPA pays for a substantial portion of Guam EPA's salary, but that mission is there to protect the public interest. And I've never had enough resources. That's not an excuse to be on top, especially something this large, this magnitude of project, to not be on top of it, not doing regular inspections. That raises a big question mark in my mind. And I think overall the community's response is tremendous disappointment. Because we can point all the fingers at the contractor and ride our high horse and say, they didn't comply. But looking at this issue, I see failure on the part of key agencies that should have been inspecting these sites and ensuring that the erosion control measures were put in place.
All right, well, Senator, tell us what you really think.
You asked me my opinion. I mean, if
you're
I
always
have
that
experience,
look in the
maybe I wouldn't
mirror.
have a comment, but I've been dealing with at Guam Epa at a time. We haven't had as large a building construction period as we did in the early 90s, and the resurgence of our economy on Guam and the expansion that happened during that time. And we had just as limited resources. If you recall, Menengan Hills actually ended up with one of the largest at the time fines by Guam EPA and US EPA for wetland violations. You're not there every day, but certainly regular routine inspections can ensure compliance. And I don't know why that didn't happen. I think that's a question you need to ask to the respective directors and administrators of these agencies as to why that didn't happen. Because while it's irresponsible of the contractor to have done what they did, it's also irresponsible for the key agencies that were asleep at the wheel when this construction was going on.
Agreed. Well, let's just look at who's not coming on. DPW is not coming on. Nick Lee, Guam EPA, they're here. So that's the big part of the conversation. That's an agency that, should have been over there inspecting stuff, and they don't want to come on. So I'll put another ask out. Nick,
but this is a question the community needs to ask. It's probably something the legislature. I mean, I don't like getting involved when ongoing investigations are happening, but I'm also concerned. I mean, that, and I did talk to Senator Sabina yesterday, who's the oversight chair. I think we need to look into this issue because, we go through this budget process and almost except, very few. I mean, land management director is one of the rare ones that came before us during these budget hearings and is not asking for more money, but we hear that constantly. And while there's some legitimate reasons as to why we don't have enough resources to do certain things, I think we understand that. There's only so much money our people can afford to run this government. But for what money they are paying, I think they should have an expectation that especially a project of this size. I mean, we're not talking about a backyard, somebody's out digging in their backyard at the residential house. We're talking about a substantial construction that looks like it covers a significant amount of acreage.
Yeah,
this thing definitely should have been on the radar, so to speak, and they should have been doing regular inspections. The fact that those ponding basins, that's the key issue. The fact that those ponding basins were not completed and not constructed, and yet I look at the photograph and see so many solar panels sitting there, tells me that construction continued without this being addressed, and the key agencies that should have been knocking on the door saying, "Hey, stop your work, address compliance, and we move on." I don't see the evidence of that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you,
We're
Senator.
gonna give Nick the last word here. Nick.
And certainly, there's a lot of things that we can agree with Senator Brown's remarks there. I do want to reiterate that the work that is being done now is addressing compliance. I want to make that very clear, that corrective action is being taken. I also don't want to take away from some of the good that the agency has done. Over the past few years. Certainly, everybody can agree that there was no good reason why we're in this situation with Marbo Cave today. We absolutely agree with that. We are not a perfect agency. We are fortunate, however, to have a former administrator and a former deputy on the legislature that we can rely on and count on to help us, with any legislation that will enhance our services and help our agency modernize and get to a level where the community is more accepting of. So those are some of the things that I would want to convey,
I think he's frozen.
Oh man, I don't know. He's frozen after all that hot from Senator Brown.
Real talk.
Real talk,
Real
yeah.
talk.
Well, Nick, you kind of froze up there. Okay. All right. Good talk. Right on.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
Thank you too. It's good to talk to you guys.
Always, yeah. Good job.
Bye.
Thanks.
Take care.
Sorry, Nick.
Good luck in session.
Oh boy.
Yeah, Nick's still frozen.
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
It's okay. He'll thaw eventually. Let's go ahead and go to the KUAM News Zoom room where we have the president and CEO of the Guam Visitors Bureau, former Governor Carl Gutierrez, standing by. And ladies and gentlemen,